At jam 2:47 in the morning, an entire American town was asleep. Lights were off. Children were dreaming. Factories were silent. Then, something invisible slipped into the air. There was no more explosion, no more warning sirens, and at first, no more screams. But by sunrise, people would be coughing blood. Animals would be dead in the streets. And the government would already be preparing its statement. This incident is under control. It wasn't. This is the true story of one of the darkest disasters in American history, an event so dangerous that for years, officials denied it ever happened. The town sat quietly along a river that powered its economy. Generations had worked in the same factories, trusted the same systems, and drank the same water. The plant nearby was considered safe, regulated, modern, at least. That's what people were told. Inside that facility, storage tanks held thousands of gallons of toxic chemicals used daily, disposed of casually, and barely monitored. Reports of corrosion had been filed. Maintenance warnings were ignored. Cutting costs mattered more than safety. That night, a valve failed. Gas leaked silently into the night air, a heavy, invisible cloud crawling along the ground, slipping through open windows and door cracks. People inhaled it while they slept. Some of them would never wake up. Within hours, hospitals were completely overwhelmed. Doctors had no more idea what they were dealing with. The symptoms didn't make any sense: burning lungs, sudden blindness, violent seizures. Local officials called federal authorities for help. And that's when the story changed. By afternoon, military vehicles were blocking the roads. Reporters were kept miles away. A single press release was issued, claiming a minor industrial accident. But the residents knew better. Entire neighborhoods were being evacuated without any explanation. Pets were left behind. Homes were sealed. And then, silence. Records disappeared. Environmental data was suddenly classified. Victims were told not to speak to anyone or risk losing their compensation. For decades, the truth stayed buried, until the documents leaked. And what they revealed shocked historians. This wasn't just an accident. It was negligence on a national scale. And what happened next would destroy the town forever. What the public never heard was what happened after the disaster. Within hours of the incident, unmarked federal vehicles had surrounded the entire area. Roads were blocked, and the local police were ordered to stand down. National Guard units arrived before sunrise not to rescue, but to secure. Survivors were separated immediately. Men, women, even children were questioned in isolation. They were told not to speak to journalists, not to call relatives, not to write letters. The doctors on scene noticed something strange. Some survivors weren't physically injured, but they were shaking uncontrollably. They spoke about sounds that didn't make sense, about intense pressure inside their heads, about a single moment when the air itself felt wrong. One man kept repeating the same sentence over and over. It wasn't an accident. It was too precise. Official reports blamed structural failure. Engineers released simplified diagrams to the media, showing a simple, containable mistake. But inside sealed government files, the language was very different. Internal memos described unexpected chemical reactions, chain failures, and parameters that had been exceeded far beyond any predicted limits. Someone had pushed the system further than it was ever designed to go. And they knew it. 3 days later, the first death occurred not from the original disaster, but from sudden, unexplained organ failure. Autopsy results were classified immediately. Then another survivor collapsed, and another. Hospitals were ordered to stop using certain diagnostic equipment around these specific patients. One nurse later testified that doctors were receiving direct instructions by phone, while federal agents stood inside the room watching. By the end of the month, more than half of the original survivors were dead. The media never reported it. Their deaths were scattered across different causes: heart issues, sudden infections, unrelated complications. On paper, nothing connected them, but a single epidemiologist noticed something chilling. Every single survivor who died had been within the inner perimeter at the moment of the disaster. Those farther away survived. Whatever happened that day didn't just destroy structures, it changed people. Behind closed doors, lawmakers argued over responsibility. One report blamed oversight failures, another blamed private contractors, but a third report, one that was never released, used a single sentence that terrified everyone who read it. The event demonstrated irreversible consequences beyond human control. That report was locked away for good. Years passed. The site was sealed permanently. Satellite images began to blur the area. Maps removed its name. No zoning laws were passed to make sure nothing would ever be built there again. But the story didn't stay buried. Decades later, a Freedom of Information Act request forced the release of thousands of pages of documents heavily redacted, but enough to reveal the truth. The disaster wasn't an accident. It was a test. A test rushed by political pressure. Approved without a full safety review, ignoring direct warnings from scientists who begged for a delay. The system had done exactly what it was told to do. The humans had failed. To this day, no more one has ever been prosecuted. No more official apology was ever issued. Indeed, the families of those who died never received any real answers. America simply moved on, but buried under tons of concrete, silence, indeed classified ink. The consequences of that day still exist. By the time dawn broke, the air around the disaster zone was already sealed. Military trucks formed a tight perimeter before the sun was even fully up. Soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, their rifles lowered but ready not for an enemy, but for their own civilians. Survivors who tried to leave were stopped, questioned, and quietly redirected. Some were told it was for their own safety. Others were told nothing at all. Inside the command tents, officials realized the truth was far worse than they feared. The damage wasn't contained. Whatever had gone wrong the night before had already spread through the water, through the soil, through air currents they could no more longer track. Doctors working on the victims noticed the same terrifying patterns. Burns that didn't look like burns. Bleeding that wouldn't stop. Eyes clouding over within hours. People who seemed fine in the morning were dead by nightfall. Indeed, those who survived were never the same again. A decision was made, one that would change thousands of lives forever. Evacuation wasn't enough. The town itself had to disappear. Within days, buses arrived under armed escort. Families were given only minutes to gather their belongings. Pets were ordered left behind. Homes were locked and marked with symbols that no more one explained. Children kept asking when they would come back home. No more one answered. Official statements told the public it was a temporary relocation due to environmental concerns. Newspapers printed carefully worded headlines. Radio stations repeated the same calm, reassuring phrases. But behind closed doors, the documents told a different story. Internal reports admitted the disaster was man-made. It was a chain of ignored warnings, cost-cutting decisions, and the experiments pushed beyond their safe limits. And when it all collapsed, the truth became too dangerous to release. So, the cover-up began. Records were sealed under national security classifications. Medical data was systematically destroyed. Death certificates listed vague causes: organ failure, unknown illness, industrial accident. The town's name slowly vanished from maps, first from road signs, then from school textbooks, then from official government archives. Within a single generation, it was as if the place had never existed. But history has a way of leaking through the cracks. Decades later, journalists began filing Freedom of Information requests. Most were denied. Some came back with pages that were completely blacked out. Yet, a few documents slipped through. Memos discussing unacceptable exposure levels. Notice mentioning civilian casualties beyond projections. And a chilling phrase repeated again and again: risk of public panic if disclosed. Former residents, now elderly, started speaking out. Their stories matched too closely to be a coincidence. They all remembered the soldiers. They remembered the sickness. They remembered being told, forcefully, never to talk about it. One man said his father worked cleanup that week and he died just months later, even though doctors could never explain why. A woman recalled her mother washing clothes that glowed faintly in the dark. Another survivor said something even stranger. Years after the evacuation, the government returned. They didn't rebuild, they buried. Concrete was poured deep into the ground. Entire foundations were entombed. Whatever remained beneath the surface was sealed like a tomb. Satellite images today show an empty scar on the land. No more houses, no more streets, just uneven ground and the restricted access signs. Officially, nothing happened, sir. Unofficially, the consequences are still unfolding. Environmental scientists who've studied nearby areas report abnormalities, elevated readings that don't match any natural explanation. Every so often, a classified document is quietly declassified, revealing just enough to confirm what the survivors always knew. This wasn't an accident. It was a failure. Indeed, the silence that followed was intentional. America didn't just survive the disaster. It erased it. Because some truths, once spoken, can never be taken back. Indeed, some disasters are considered too costly for the public to remember.